Hello and welcome to the Check Out This Record podcast. My name is Frank, and with me is my good buddy Mark. This is the podcast where we talk about all sorts of musical goodness. We will review albums we have never heard of before. We will suggest albums to each other to review, and we have a wide variety of musical discussions. You can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, along with anywhere that you listen to podcasts at. And speaking of YouTube, Mark, you know what I did?
Did you watch a video?
Well, that would be why someone would go to YouTube, right? But for our videos, what I happen to do is I timestamped the episode. So if you go to YouTube and you find our episodes and you click the description, you're going to see. So if you want to skip over both of us yapping, you could go ahead and right to the reviews. Just click on the timestamp. Boom, it takes you right there.
Boom.
Right
a
there.
Stamp in time.
That's right. And
you put that on an envelope.
You should most certainly can. And hopefully you find comfort and entertainment in what we have to offer if you can and enjoy us during your very stressful days. And that's really all that matters. And if you really enjoy what we have to say and we feel like we've earned it, leave us a 5-star review. And please let us know how you think we're doing. Mark, my man, how are you?
I'm doing good, Frank. Just fun little whiskey-based cocktails, some sweet tunes. And I just wanted to follow up with what Frank was saying and say that anything less than a 5-star review, you can just keep it to your dirty self.
That's right. You heard it right here.
How are you, buddy?
I'm good, my man. And you know, I was thinking last week, so we discussed some new releases coming up, and this one wasn't on my radar that I saw, but you know, Glenn Danzig, obviously singer of the Misfits and solo artist Danzig. Well, he's got a cover album coming out of Elvis tunes, Mark.
You know, I genuinely thought that was a post from The Onion. I thought in reviewing or in our search to find stuff when I saw that, I thought that was like a practical joke in internet's hoax, if you will. So seriously, I genuinely thought that was a joke. I just went, okay, I guess that's funny, and I moved on. I had no time did I stop and think that was serious.
Yeah, and apparently it's due out April 17th, so it's legit serious, and it's interesting because listen, I think Glenn has a really great voice. I think his interpretation of the Elvis songs will be interesting to say the least. And I'm not going to go out day one and listen to it. I'm sure you're not either. But it had me thinking of the person's songs he's covering, Elvis, Undisputed King, right? In so many ways, musically, culturally. But what if some other early rock and rollers didn't pass away tragically, and of course, or didn't have instances happen? Would we sit here and say that they may have been bigger than Elvis? I mean, well, let's talk about a couple of people. But Mark, your thoughts. I know offline we've always chatted about this, but I mean, would have Elvis just been undisputed no matter who was around during that time?
You know, this is
it's a tough one.
It's a tough one, right? Especially when we're comparing them to people who passed away tragically. Not that Elvis's death upon a toilet with a peanut butter sandwich in his hand wasn't tragic.
Peanut butter and banana, my friend.
Yeah, Lord knows that's how they're going to find me. You know, but it's one of those things, you know, like what if Kurt Cobain killed himself because he knew he was out of music? You know, I mean, we all know that Courtney did it, but that's not the point. The point is, like, you know, we take these artists who die tragically or young. You know, there's that whole 27 Club or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep. And we project a little bit of like, well, you know, the next couple records would have been really good upon them, and we give them kind of that stature and that, you know, and a few people it kind of works out. You know, you look at the body of work that Hendrix left behind.
Yeah.
And, you know, they've been able to piece together a couple, you know, interesting collections of songs out of those. But I think it's, you know, it's really it's fun to speculate. So let's
is. Yeah, let's do it. Absolutely. And then funny too, on a side note, you mentioned Kurt Cobain, and I always thought that if there was something after In Utero, I mean, there's no guarantee that it would be good, right?
Yeah, certainly not. I mean, that's the gamble, right? Is you know, if I'm going to make a very punk rock reference here, if Tim Armstrong had died after the second Rancid self-titled album, you know, number 5, would we just have assumed that Rancid went on to make 5 more amazing records, or that they would have shit the bed the way they did.
Yeah.
We don't know. It's one of those things. So that's why I kind of feel like we tend to give people when they die a little more credit to what those albums may have actually been.
Good point. And obviously we thrust them into immortality as well, which is kind of another stratosphere, so to speak, about their legacy. But I think we do have a tendency to do that, and maybe we need to look even deeper too into people's bodies of work, and then if they passed away, like, is the legacy really warranted, so to speak? But right now we're talking about Elvis, so let's go through a couple of people, and 4 people in particular. Let's mention them and see what we think about it. Okay.
Sure.
Well, first one, and I did say dead, but this guy is living. Jerry Lee Lewis, right? Living, right. I know. He was slated, right? Yes, that's him, exactly. He was slated to be bigger than Elvis, so people say. Who are they? The people out there, right? Obviously, we know that being 23 and marrying your 13-year-old cousin, that didn't really sit well with a lot of people. But there was legit heat between him and Elvis. I mean, in '76, he was arrested outside of Graceland for allegedly intending to shoot Elvis, which is just crazy. Mark, do you think that Jerry Lee had the capabilities to be bigger than Elvis?
No, I really don't. I know that the cousin fucking thing put a lot of people off.
It did.
The attempted assault on Elvis may have turned a few more people away, but in that point, we're already talking the 70s.
Yeah.
I feel like he did what he had, or he did what he was able to do with the time he was given. And the fact of the matter is, it fell a little short.
Right.
And it's certainly at no point, not at no point, certainly Elvis cleared what Jerry Lee was doing, in terms of popularity and abilities. And Jerry Lee was just never able to catch up.
Could be why he was outside of Graceland in 1976, right?
Yeah, that's I was so interested when you put that on there, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jerry Lee, there's nothing wrong with Jerry Lee Lewis. Other than the cousin fucking. I think in 1976, it's fair to assume that a lot of people were on cocaine and wanted to kill Elvis. I feel like most people felt that way.
Yeah.
But I don't think he compared to Elvis. I think if you go record for record, or if you do single for single, I can't think of a situation where Jerry Lee's like even close.
Yeah, and he probably had, if you think about it, and the scale, obviously, Elvis was a worldwide phenomenon, right? And Jerry Lee was probably a little bit more that and localized too. So definitely different. Let's move on to the next gentleman. We have Buddy Holly here, and of course, in 1959, there was a tragic plane crash. He died so young. He wrote, though, a lot of songs in the time when people weren't. People were just singing the songs. They didn't write them, and he influenced Elvis. That's stuff I noticed in my research. And of course, Lennon McCartney cited him as a massive influence. Would have Buddy Holly been a contender for Elvis?
No, I don't think so. And it's nothing against Buddy Holly.
Sure.
I absolutely adore Buddy Holly. I think he's one of the great early rock and rollers. But I think when you look at what made Elvis, we're talking, obviously nobody's commenting on Elvis's songwriting abilities, right? Right. We're talking about performance. We're talking about his stature. We're talking about
moving the hips, right? Moving the hips,
right? And I think that's what it boils down to. A lot of is that Elvis was able to deliver America its sexual awakening.
Yeah.
And Buddy Holly was just a kind of a cute preteen part of that, and that's not to say he wasn't a great songwriter, and that's not to say his death wasn't tragic.
Yeah.
Because I definitely think, for me, and again, maybe I'm putting 3 good albums out there as gimmies in front of him because he passed away before his prime. I just don't think he would have had lasting impact that Elvis did, or not, because he doesn't. He just doesn't. A few more records. Let's assume he gets 4 or 5 in before they start turning to shit. And not that Elvis didn't have shit records, but I just don't know. I think in terms of songwriting, was he maybe more important in a certain kind of way? Maybe. I think there's definitely an argument for that. But when it comes to like, could Buddy Holly have taken the throne of King of Rock and Roll from Elvis, or been able to defend it from Elvis, as he happened a little before him? I don't think so. I think Elvis is winning.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, and think about it too. They're going in probably different directions if you think about it. Buddy had the thick black specs glasses. That kind of look. Elvis had the nice hair, the sideburns, good looking dude. I mean, if Buddy was still around, he would have maybe went still in the path of rock and roll, and Elvis was going into just all different sorts of music. So I mean, maybe a comparison like that isn't even something that would be on most people's minds.
Yeah, I feel like you're probably Elvis and I'm like a fat Buddy Holly in this situation.
There you go.
No, that has nothing to do with anything. No, really, to me, again, nothing against Elvis, nothing against Buddy Holly.
No, I know.
I don't think we're apples to apples on this. I think we're like apples to bananas.
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
Like, these are just two very different artists who happen to play, quote unquote rock and roll music.
Yeah, good point. Very good point.
So,
well, next we got another guy who's I enjoy his music a lot. Gene Vincent, of course, known for Be-Bop-A-Lula, considered an early example of rockabilly, had a large overseas following. He died at 36 from a stomach ulcer in 1971. I don't mean to laugh about that, but I mean, it's crazy how these guys just died. He really defined that greasy-haired leather jacket, hot rod type guy. What about him? I mean, Elvis was, you could say that first album was rockabilly, but then obviously, again, musically took a whole new stratosphere. Do you think Gene Vincent could have been a contender for Elvis?
No, and I'll tell you why.
Sure.
Gene Vincent, and I believe the Blue Caps.
Yep.
Blue Caps. Had a couple records. In fact, Gene Vincent was active musically for 14 plus years.
Yeah.
Before his death. I feel like if there had been, and I certainly don't mean to demean him by calling him a one-hit wonder.
Sure.
I think he's got a very underrated catalog of work.
Yeah.
I just feel like if he had any shot at Elvis, it would have been more prevalent. It would be more of an active conversation than just you and me right now. But again, I got nothing against him. I think especially for early rock and roll, he was a great. But he just doesn't hold up to what Elvis did.
Yeah. Yeah. And think about it, he lasted to 1971, where Buddy Holly obviously passed away, 59, and the next gentleman passed away really young too, and he's one of my favorites, is Eddie Cochran, 20 Flight Rock, Summertime Blues, which he has writing credits for, which is awesome. He died at 21 in a car accident in England, and Gene Vincent, ironically, was also in the car and survived. Here's the cool thing with Eddie, though. He wrote the tracks. He experimented with multi-track recording, distortion techniques, and overdubbing. He played the guitar, piano, bass, drums. Punks would come to love him, especially overseas. He was a good-looking guy, nice set of hair. Obviously, I'm really stressing the hair here because mine is on its way out, right? And him and Vincent just look like rock and rollers. Again, a large overseas following. What do you think about Eddie?
I would have loved to seen more Eddie Cochran.
Yeah, I know. It's a shame.
20 Flight Rock is just phenomenal. It's a quintessential rockabilly song to me.
Yeah.
I think he's got his legacy and he's got his roots. And his impact can't be denied. But again, we're comparing a tool shed to the Twin Towers here.
Yeah.
He's just not comparable to Elvis to me.
Right.
And not that, we couldn't sit down and compare the, album for album or something like that. I just don't think we're not. See, Elvis is one of those, I'm just going to stammer on the internet, folks. Elvis is one of those characters that was bigger than music. And he was, and I don't just mean that because of the movies and because of the military service or whatever. His icon, is much bigger than just the music, than just the hips, than just the the movies and whatever else, and the jumpsuits and the time in Vegas.
Yeah.
He's taken on another life. And that's why, to me, you can really only compare Elvis to the Beatles, Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And if you're pushing it, a band that I've completely forgotten the name of now that I got up to saying it.
Who's that?
I don't know. I can't think of it.
Or you got a song, or you got something?
It was in there, but it's gone now. But we're talking about artists that have gone. Oh, I was going to say the Rolling Stones. I think the Rolling Stones, you could make an argument if you're just talking music for music. I think they have this genuine rock and roll quality to them that could rival that of Elvis's. But when we refer to Elvis as the king of rock and roll, we're not just talking about rock and roll. Right?
Yeah, that's the key. That's the key right there.
And that's that's part of the reason that government based on religious figures, man in the sky picking out its leaders, doesn't work for government, and it doesn't work for my goddamn rock and roll either. I tried to quote Monty Python there.
I got it. Don't worry.
As long as you did, let's face it, it's only me and you listen to this anyways. It's like I just kind of I don't buy that like Prince of Pop or King of Rock and Roll or what was Prince, the slutty court gesture of rock and roll. Like I just don't buy any of those titles. Like they don't mean anything.
Yeah,
they're kind of arbitrary, and I think these bands that we really want to look at have far more depth than Elvis. Because really, again, Elvis, we're not talking about his songwriting abilities.
Sure. Yeah, and listen, not taking anything away, but let's remember one thing. Sun Records and Sam Phillips, they saw Elvis, and they said, hey, that's our guy. They really invested in him. All right. So it's a little bit different than the gentleman I mentioned before, which they have a common theme, which was they were early rock and rollers. And you bring up a good point, Mark. Elvis transcended again everything, just as Michael Jackson transcended everything. Yes, one was called the king of rock and roll and the other was king of pop, but really it was just worldwide. I mean, it was all everything. It was just music in general. Again, Eddie Cochran was living. More than likely, he would have had a sustained, really good career, probably in the realm, though, of rock and roll, right? And rock and roll only, maybe.
Yep, I agree with that. And, I think what's most important to mention is that the people who care about Elvis and Elvis's legacy, they're dying, and that's okay.
There you go. There you go.
I mean, like I suppose, there's a place, for guys like you who inherently love rock and roll.
Yeah.
You're bringing up some young folks in your life. Frank happens to have two little girls.
I do.
But there's people out there, with little boys too,
yes.
or a mix, maybe one of each, maybe two of one of the other. People are doing different things with their biology these days. But one of the interesting things that they're doing is going like, well, what music do you introduce your children to?
Yeah.
And kind of like old time rock and roll is kind of, it's funny because then it was blasphemous.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's kind of a safe starting point. So like, should we be introducing kids to Elvis? And the sexuality of that pelvis shake.
Yeah,
I think so. And I kind of like I kind of feel weird in saying that like that's where I see the future of Elvis is as kiddie music. And I specifically say KIDDIE kiddie music because I couldn't put on an Elvis record right now and listen to it if you paid me to. I couldn't be bothered.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting too because my kids know of Elvis, obviously, because he's a cultural icon, right? They know of other people too, like Michael Jackson and stuff like that. They listen to their music. They know the hits. They know the songs. It's so interesting. It's kind of almost part of your starter kit, especially with the kids, introducing them to songs, and maybe that's kind of where it starts, and that's how Elvis's legacy gets cemented, and then kind of carries on from there. And interesting though to think about. And maybe we need to do a deeper dive into some Elvis stuff too. There's pre-Army Elvis, right? Post-Army Elvis. Yeah. Maybe we won't. Maybe we
I don't know.
will.
I mean, whatever.
Maybe we
If you
won't.
find something compelling to listen to, and I'll
there,
listen to it.
there we
But
go.
I mean, you're going to hear from me about it if it
You
sucks.
are, you
So.
are, you are. Now, one thing that Elvis he did obviously a whole bunch of different music and songs, and there's gospel songs, and there's also soul music, right? And let's talk about soul music because that's going to then segue into really
Is there an Elvis soul record?
the main event. I don't think there is.
I mean, I know he did like maybe a little bit of gospel.
Right, which
All
kind of
right.
translated
Kind of a broad
into
generalization, but all right.
Sure. I don't think he had a soul like a record that was 100%.
Oh, I agree that he didn't have a soul.
Yeah. Well, that okay.
Yeah, you said it.
I guess I did, my friend.
You did.
but he does have a theme park called Graceland where you could go to and see everything about him.
Is it a theme park? Is there a roller coaster, or is it just?
No.
Because that'd be pretty cool if like you got in like a little pink Cadillac and you pulled the safety bar back till it clicked, and then like it just kind of went through Elvis's house, like.
Yeah,
I don't know why it would be playing that music and not like Hound Dog or something.
Yeah, or Heartbreak Hotel, right?
Right.
I don't know. My wife has been there. Prior to me meeting her, she says it's kind of just an estate and it's a huge establishment that a lot of tourists come to and see. The house, it's an old school house, not vaulted ceilings or anything, and it's just interesting to see. I don't think it's a theme park, although it did for some reason make me think of in the early 2000s in Myrtle Beach they were going to do a hard rock park. I don't know if you remember that, and it was going to be themed after all different eras of music. I think it did open and then it like closed shortly after. So. I know.
Interesting. Maybe we'll have to have your wife on as the official Graceland expert of the Check Out This Record podcast. I love this sigh. The sigh you made was perfect.
Yeah,
I'm kidding. Jen, you don't have to do it. Don't worry.
I just wanted to say how many peanut butter and banana sandwiches she saw at the estate. Right. That's all.
Right.
And obviously, as you guys could tell, I actually do enjoy a good peanut butter and banana sandwich.
Yeah, as do I.
With my almond milk nowadays, because I'm getting older, and they say almond milk is good. So, So soul music. All right, let's talk about its characteristics. Right, its tone. It's characterized by a wide range of emotions. Right.
Sure.
The artist used various sounds from gentle, smooth, and harsh, raspy singing to convey their messages. This is from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, your favorite place, Mark, but they say...
No, it's bullshit.
That's why I wanted to say this is not from me. It's from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Soul is music that arose out of the Black experience in America through the transmutation of gospel and rhythm and blues into a form of funky, secular, testifying, catchy rhythms, stressed by hand claps, body movements, and important features of soul music. Other characteristics are a call and response between the lead vocalist and the chorus, and especially a tense vocal sound. The style also occasionally uses improvisational additions, twirls, and auxiliary sounds. So here, to me, and well, not to me, to my old man, I should say, Sinatra was his idol, right? He loved Sinatra. He loved Bing Crosby and some early rock and rollers and Motown and doo-wop style type songs. Every Saturday we would go to the place where my father worked, and there'd be a guy playing the guitar, and the first song that he would want to request every single Saturday was Under the Boardwalk by the Drifters. That's an early kind of, obviously on the Motown side of the soul stuff, but that's an early memory of those songs I have had. Mark, do you have any particular memories of these songs and these and this genre kind of standing out to you?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Under the Boardwalk, because that's I remember that from my days working at the oldies station, and from before that in my mother's car listening to the oldies station.
Yes.
Especially when we were younger, and it was still a lot of doo-wop and a lot of Motown. And Motown does kind of get that, is it soul music? Is it pop music? Is it R&B music? It's just Motown.
Yeah.
So a lot of things fall under that umbrella. We're probably not going to do the most justice to what soul music is. I'm going to apologize off the bat. But I like it, so we're doing an episode on it. But it's funny. My father for those of you who don't know me, is a retired motorcycle enthusiast.
Yes.
And his favorite song is Under the Boardwalk.
Look at
The
that.
Drifters. Yeah.
So
I couldn't explain it to you. I mean, this is imagine a 300-pound, 6-foot-tall man riding a badass Harley Davidson down a highway, super into Under the Boardwalk. Well, how is it under the boardwalk? I mean, it's just such a funny image to me.
Yeah, my head bobbing,
it's a
pal.
great song. Thank you. You know, I played the drums for some time. I can do rhythm. Rhythm's a thing I can do.
I've heard about that. Were you ever in a band with a guy named Frank, by the way?
No, I don't think so. It doesn't sound familiar.
Bastard. Okay, good. That's funny how we both have certain memories in relation to that song, and that's crazy. Wow, that's pretty cool. So I'm glad I brought up that song. Yep. I don't know about you. I like genre mashups. I feel they make new genres, obviously, and create some really unique sounds.
Yeah, I know you're a big rap metal fan. Big rap metal fan.
Oof. Wait,
huge.
Like, you mean are you going to then say it's from the late 90s, like in 99? Because I love that year of music, Mark.
No, that was it. I was just going to call you out for liking rap metal and then leave it there. Let you do whatever you want with it.
Corn, what is it? Eminem and Biscuits, right?
Sure. Whatever you want it to be, buddy.
From Propaganda, man. Come on, bro. So, all right. So the meshing up of the music genres I like, maybe that's why I like psychobilly, punkabilly, rockabilly, punk, cowpunk, Ramones, kind of meets Hank Williams, that whole bit. So when you get to people, though, like Ray Charles, right, who combine blues and gospel styles and created a unique sound, then you have James Brown, who really added funk into the mix, you kind of get this whole now different aurora of soul music. And in the 60s, that pop element was added, right? And that's with the Motown sounds, and you get the Temptations, Four Tops and stuff like that. Those were the people as kids really, stood out to me. Obviously, I mentioned the Drifters too. Mark, your memories, I remember, Ray Charles tunes and James Brown tunes, Four Tops, Temptations. You have a lot of that going on too?
Yeah, definitely. That oldies station was a big piece of our childhood. So was the movie Good Morning Vietnam. I wanted to be on the radio because of that movie.
Totally.
Because I loved rock and roll, and that movie had a lot of great stuff to it. And Motown in particular can't be understated how important Motown was for American rock and roll or music in general. In this case, soul music. We're talking about Stevie Wonder, Aretha Franklin, Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye, Sam Cooke, Otis Redding, and of course the Jackson 5. But we're talking about Motown as a snapshot into the mid 60s, early 70s. Not necessarily Detroit only because people were coming there to record, knee deep in the sound and to record, but it was definitely the hub of it. And we had these phenomenal acts that came out of it that arguably made some of the best songs ever put to record.
Timeless songs. Yeah,
absolutely, just pure timeless. You look at how many Stevie Wonder albums where he's the only musician on them. It's absolutely insane. It's too good. So, but they all, other than that, when you take the doo-wop and the Motown and some of that Ray Charles and James Brown, and it all kind of gets jumbled into that oldies bag, which is unfortunate because there's definitely more depth and detail to those guys than just it's oldies. But that's kind of where it went for me. It all kind of files into that oldies fun, but there's a warmth to it. There's definitely soul to it.
Yeah.
So for me, Motown and these different bands that definitely took that gospel and took the blues and found a way to mash them up and to make them a little funkier, make them a little poppier. It was a beautiful thing, man, and it's made for great music. I'm going to stop rambling now.
Genre mashups again. I think that's what separated those two in particular too. And when I say those two, I mean like Ray Charles and James Brown. And like all music, then there's more subgenres, right? So also in the mid 60s, we had the Blue-Eyed Soul. So we had the Righteous Brothers, Tom Jones, Steve Winwood, some of the Van Morrison, much later Hall & Oates. I don't know about you.
White guy stealing black guy's music.
No, there you go. Right.
Yeah.
And in particular, when I say yeah, there you go. When I say the Righteous Brothers, I don't know about you, man. In particular, this is a side note. I used to hate, for some reason, I've been in just many arenas and environments when guys would just bust out and you've lost that loving feeling in an attempt to act like they were in the movie Top Gun. That happened like for this longest time when I was in high school. And then in college, for some reason, I would just be in this environment when just a whole group of guys who were friends would bust out in that song. Man, this is now a kind of my take and my aggravation with like a movie like Top Gun 2, which I'm not really the biggest fan of, but man, that annoyed me. Did you ever experience that stuff?
No, man, I absolutely love Top Gun. I always wanted to be able to pull off singing "You've Lost That Loving Feeling" in a bar.
Oh God.
But maybe it's because I don't have enough friends that I've never been able to get it going. I'm not really sure. I mean, I can see why it would get old if it happened more than like once.
It just annoy me, man. Oh
yeah. All right, that's
like why couldn't they bust out like London Calling, right? I get you're trying to do Top Gun, but man, that tune, it was just, that tune got old for me. But anyway, they also did soul, and of course, there's soul in the geographic sense too, where you have Detroit, the Motown, which we talked about, Southern Memphis, Birmingham, New Orleans, Chicago, Philly, psychedelic, British, and neo-modern. And unfortunately, I think this is where kind of throws me off a little bit, because modern soul lacks, I think, what its own name represents, and that's soul. Right nowadays, it's auto-tune, it's high production, it's singers doing runs and runs and runs, and you guessed it, runs. When my wife watches these singer competition songs, I see these people who have fantastic voices. God knows I have a horrible singing voice, but the runs, they're ear grating.
Can I pump the brakes on it?
Yeah, please go ahead, man.
I have no idea what you're talking about. when you say runs and runs and runs and runs, are you referring to like the
the voice. The voice, the high spots in the voice, right, where it keeps going and going, and they take the words and they accent it out loud and they bellow it, right? So it's really where the voice gets strained the most, right?
And you think that's a product of new soul and not just modern garbage pop music? Singing competitions? I mean,
probably a little bit of both, and mixing. That's why I said the mixing too with like the auto tune and the high production, and absolutely, there's a crossover. I agree with you on that for sure.
Yeah, because it sounds like you're describing every new music being made in the year 2020. Like, hey, look, Frank and I are rock and roll guys. We don't really make bones about that. There's a bunch of dudes in the rock and roll world that are using auto tune and creating fake rhythms and fake, to make themselves sound better, cloud nothing. But
which I still haven't listened to since your amazing review of it.
But I think just in the defense of new soul, because I happen to disagree with Frank on this one.
Sure.
I highly recommend Leon Bridges, Nathaniel Ratliff, and the Night Sweats.
So that was someone who was also recommended to me, not by you, by someone else. But go ahead.
Tweed Funk, Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, and Vintage Trouble. I think there's a really nice movement of new soul going on. That's full bands, really laying it out there, getting out, doing the work, putting the practices together, building a really unique sound. Are some of them, like if you go into the later, we're going to talk about today in St. Paul and the Broken Bones, their later records, they do play with this studio a little more and have some fun with it. But at the same time, I think it's still genuine and it's still really out there. I think there's a lot more to it. But hey, Frank's allowed his opinion. I'm allowed to think he's wrong.
Don't forget Gary Clark Jr. too, who's I know really popular. Sure. In the kind of blues, soul, and rock. And again, I'm not, when I say that too, I'm not saying that there isn't anything good out there that's underground, or by no means is it a lack of talent, because obviously it's not. And to have voices like that, and to put it all together, as I stated many times, with many different types of music, it is completely hard. It's just kind of what then gets dominated on the forefront, and things like I've seen in the singing competitions. if they're supposed to sell me on it, they haven't. I guess that's my point at the end of the day. And I'm not going and saying, oh yeah, I'll buy a record of that person. And yeah, does it cross into pop lines? Fine, but then don't touch the soul stuff then, and leave it for the people who could actually do it.
Right. And hey, look, I don't watch any of those shows. I don't. My wife doesn't watch any of those shows. I'm blessed, I should say.
Yeah, you are.
To have
better if you don't.
Yeah, little to no contact with them, and I understand why a lot of those singers identify as soul singers, because it's just kind of a broad catch-all that allows them in these competitions to not be pigeonholed as the rock and roll guy, right?
Right.
I'd be interested to see how many of those people who have gone as soul singers, what their careers look like after that, because I'm 99% sure it's all just shitty pop music. But it's I understand. Hey, look, you're welcome to have your complaints about it. Lord knows I have my complaints about things.
Sure.
So it's certainly an interesting take.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just we'll get into St. Paul, absolutely, and just real quick,
Sure.
What I kind of also compare it to those classic tunes that we've listened to. Again, your Temptations, your Four Tops. They had great voices. It wasn't overkill too, and it had memorable choruses. And maybe that's just kind of what I like at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it'd be interesting to see, looking back. Let's call it 30 years from now.
Let's do it.
If we look at a band like St. Paul and the Broken Bones, right? And if we classify them even remotely still in the same genre as Ray Charles or as the Drifters, you know what I mean? Like, is it? Are we watching a subculture drift away from its primary source, or are we seeing the evolution of a style of music? I mean, I'm certainly not gonna. I'm certainly not going to reach out my dick and suggest that, hey, look, guys, we're on the cutting edge here, because you know what, they could just turn to shit tomorrow.
They can.
And bands have for less. So, it's an interesting thing. That's when me and Frank do our lists all the time. You always hear us say, look, these things are ever changing.
Yeah, totally.
Music changes, well, I shouldn't say music changes. Music stays the same. We change, and how we feel about it changes, and how it affects us changes. So it's an interesting thing. Who knows? Years from now, St. Paul might come out as a Nazi sympathizer, and I'll never listen to another record again.
There you go. And Mark will stack it in right next to his Cloud Nothings record, and he'll never listen to it.
I will shit on it and burn it.
So let's get to it. St. Paul and the Broken Bones, Half the City, 2014 is when the album came out. So St. Paul and the Broken Bones, not from St. Paul, Minnesota, threw me off there. They're from Birmingham, Alabama. They were formed in 2012. It was cool to find out that a member of the band was previously part of the 400 unit, which is the band that Jason Isbell plays with. And I'm a really big fan of Jason Isbell. And for those who aren't, check out his stuff. I'll throw an album someday in Mark's direction,
because I have no idea who that is.
He's fantastic songwriter, fantastic. This album was also produced by a member of a band who I've heard of called the Alabama Shakes. So it's a tough one for me to get into, just because again it's so ingrained in me to lean towards guitar, bass, drums type sounds, traditional verses, as I said, and the hooky choruses. So it's one of those things where it's not them, it's this guy, it's me. I've researched some videos. I said, okay, so if I can't get into the music and invested into the music early on, let me get invested into the guy. So I looked some interviews up with Paul Janeway, the singer, passionate singer. The band, I mean, first of all, they play tight, and the musicality of it is kind of cool too. And I like the horns. In fact, sometimes I also get a ska kind of big band feel. Like I feel like that's where the songs are going. But again, I watched some interviews with Paul. He's a cool, humble dude. I like him. An interesting story. Said he was trained to be a preacher, and he explains that he had a strict upbringing. He recalls an incident, though, when his mother found his copy of Nirvana's Nevermind. His mom threw it away, and she tells him that if that didn't happen, you would have been a soul singer. So that's kind of cool. And I liked him, man. Super humble dude. Mark, your thoughts on him as the front man, the leader of the group, really taking on this persona here.
Yeah, he does a great job of selling it. If you get a chance to go online and look at some of the live footage of these guys,
Yeah,
they
cool.
really put a fun show together. It's really energetic, and he does a great job kind of leading the band emotionally through the shows. It's really cool, and I think a lot of that comes through with this record. They really allow him to use his voice as an instrument. Um, I know that's cliche as fuck to say,
No,
but
but it
you
makes
really,
sense.
yeah, you really get to see him to use it and be part of the band in a way. A lot of singers tend to stand out in front of the band, whereas he really fits in with the band, and it's really a cohesive unit, especially one where he's kind of presented as the front man. But that's kind of, I think, a throwback to that soul mentality.
Now, and I mentioned here too, a kind of like a soul or a ska kind of big band feel. Did you ever feel that too? In listening to some of these tracks, you're like, oh, okay, where's the ska guitars coming in on? Just because I don't know, maybe it's the horns, which I kind of like. It's maybe my favorite part of the way the music is presented. But did you ever feel it could kind of cross into some other different paths?
Oh, definitely. I think there's definitely some of the horn parts in particular. There's some great piano and organ parts that really harken back, maybe not necessarily to ska parts, but there's definitely that kind of big band, kind of Brian Setzer feel to a couple of the pieces. You can tell that the musicianship in this, like nobody here sucks. There's not like
No,
there's nobody in this band is dragging their feet. Like this is a really tight. There's some
hell
really
no.
smart horn parts in here. We'll get to it when we get to the song. There's a couple bass lines where you're like, shit, dude, he carried that whole song just on a bass line. Like really cool, really inventive songs here. But yeah, in terms of Paul Janeway and leading this band, I really feel like he does a great job. Some of the interviews I've seen with him, I agree with Frank. He seems like a humble dude. He's really stoked to just be playing
Yeah,
in a soul band. Like I mentioned when I brought this up last week, this was supposed to be like a one and done EP between him and the bass player, where they were just going to kind of lay down some fun tracks and then move on with their lives and get out of the music industry. So for something like that to turn into something so meaningful, you can really tell that the band appreciates it for what it
yeah,
is.
yeah, totally, and he's thankful for that for sure, and that's why I wanted to research him too, because I said, oh, again, I said if I'm not digging the music style per se, I have to at least dig the person behind it, and I'm glad to come find out that I did, and he's a cool guy because hey, listen, we don't like U2's music, but we also don't like Bono, right? As a as a character, so.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so here's the thing with this album. Like sometimes I just feel though everything doesn't need to be emoted. Like the big hits on the voice, sometimes it does sound like, and he's a remarkable singer, but has shards of glass like that's in his throats, and he's just trying to dislodge it. And I know that's a common characteristic, but again, and I'm going to stress that it's just that's my take on it, and it gets hard for me to get through. But I do like the homage of what was back in the day, and however it translates well, although it creates so minimal variety on the record. And the comments I kept seeing was that the production album, but the production value on this album really waters down the live sound, which I could see. But this album in particular did get some critique just about the overall production. I'm not a production type guy. I mean, so to me, it did sound big and vibrant. But Mark, I mean, did any pickups on that?
I liked the way the band used very low moments musically, not very low moments, but low volume moments
Right.
to really emphasize points, to emphasize lyrics, to emphasize maybe a horn part or something like that. I could see where some people might have felt that, it didn't have the greatest production quality, but you know what? It's a first album.
First album.
I believe they put out one EP before this.
Yeah.
I think overall, it's a great sounding record. I think if you look at there's some live performances
Yeah.
on tape that really showcase the power of the band. Are those a little bit, I don't want to say more fun to listen to. Do those carry over maybe a little better? Perhaps. But I think this record, for what it is, stands on its own 2 feet. I think it's the quality of the record is not demuned by the quality of the recording.
Well, and again, the cool part is this is where it started from, right? It's not supposed to be the most polished. That's 3 records down the line, right? It's supposed to start off somewhere, and this is where it starts off, right?
Yep.
So getting into this album, we start off, and I'm not going to do, although I do mention quite a few of the tracks, but I'm going to kind of gloss over some more. But, we start off with I'm Torn Up, which is a mellow, somber tune. Starts off again with interesting horns, and Paul's just bellowing vocals come in and really make it an emotional tune. We keep seeing emotional here with soul music. Almost it makes me think just right now as we're talking about it, a precursor to what would eventually become emo, right? In its own right. It's interesting how that could occur. The high notes towards the end, listen, I could do without, but I think by now we all know that that's just me and my tastes. But I'm Torn Up starts it off. The next track, we get the old school vibe to me. I just got a very old school vibe during this next one, and the next song is called Don't Mean a Thing. It does lose me with the slow down verses, but the build up and the horns, and when that kind of all comes together, it redeems it. We get Call Me, which is one of their more popular songs, and it sounds right from the early 60s. Again, the horns here really added a nice little touch for me. Everything else, I would say doesn't, but the horns do it.
I think
Mark, I was going to ask kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think "Call Me" is definitely the first great track on the record. I would have preferred to see this as the first track before "I'm Torn Up." I like "I'm All Torn Up." I like that it's slow intro and it's very kind of heartbreaky, and then into "Don't Mean a Thing" where you get that really kind of jazzy intro.
Yes.
And it kind of gets into a groove. And both of those songs, lyrically. We're pretty straightforward on that kind of heartbreak thing, which is just kind of a classic
what you're getting.
Music theme.
You know what you're getting.
Yeah, you know what you're getting. This is, pretty. I almost want to say like standard style for soul music, although I really don't listen to enough of it to be able to say with authority like these are standards. But I think for me, "Call Me," and that's why I definitely jumped in right there. Was definitely this great track. The horns on it are just perfect. The guitars and the rhythm section are really tight, really on point with this one. So yeah, and it kind of has this kind of party vibe to it, which I really would have liked to see the album start with. I think overall, this is definitely a very emotional record when it comes to heartache and loss. So I understand why they would want to start with "I'm Torn Up," but I just love "Call Me." It was the first one where I was like, "Ooh, I really like this record." So yeah,
no, and I could see why that attracted people. Obviously, the next tune though, and I'm going to go on record saying this, is I would say my favorite track from the album. It's like a mighty river. Mm-hmm. If you took away the soul vocals, it would still on its own. The instrumentation of it would be great. It's rocking. I think it is as a song could be in this genre. Maybe that's why I took to it. I like the lyrics where it's like she is just a pure girl and I'm just a dirty boy. I like that. It hit home for me. I guess maybe because I'm a dirty boy. But anyway.
Oh, you're definitely a dirty boy.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And but this tune I like, though. I did like it on a whole. I like playing it in all different varieties. I would say it's the tune I listen to the most. Am I hyping this one up maybe a little bit too much, Mark? Or did you feel the same sentiment with this track?
No, I agree with you. I absolutely love this song. I think the horns in this, the rhythm section just really, really crush it with what
it is. Yeah.
This is for me one of the songs where he's able to use that voice as an instrument, and it's less about what the lyrics are saying and how he's emoting through his singing. I can get it at, hey, look, if that kind of song structure and singing style doesn't appeal to you, it's definitely not going to be one of your favorites performances, that is. But I feel like this is a great example of why this band is amazing, is this song right here. And plus, it's got that really cool guitar break that builds back in, and it has a very very rock and rolly feel to
It
it.
does. It does.
So yeah, I'm definitely with you on Like a Mighty River. I just thought it
Yeah.
was a really cool song. Great, little bit of great imagery. There's not a ton of great imagery. It's most of it's pretty straightforward. It's more about delivery than trying to impress you with fancy words. And I felt like he probably turned his fancy words up the most for Like a Mighty River.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just one of those songs where everything connected. The stars aligned properly on that. Just the
Mm-hmm.
horns are good. The bass guitar is good. The guitar is good. Vocals good. I would always be curious to hear how songs like that are written, especially when they sound so good like that. So that's definitely my favorite. We get That Glow, which features a kind of almost a cool old school guitar in the beginning. It reminded me of Link Ray, and for some reason, like that rumble type sound. The guitar tone is nice and dark and gloomy, and you get the nice horns to it. Sugar Died is a great example of where, though, I kind of get lost, just a little disinterested. Again, the runs, like we were talking about earlier, with the voice and the sounding of the glass through the throat. I couldn't pick out the chorus. It just didn't check off my boxes. Mark, I mean, any feedback on those particular tunes? Do you have a favorite of those, or is there one that kind of sticks with you more than the other?
Well, I like The Glow for its bluesy kind of shapeshifterness to it. It's definitely got a cool bluesy feel. I love the piano in it. I feel like
Yeah.
the piano just adds like a layer of sadness, as most pianos do. Um, as far as Sugar Died go, I like the song, but I would have liked to see it be the end of the album. I
Oh,
feel like if you, I mean, and don't get me wrong, we'll get to Midnight when we get to Midnight, because there's no other place Midnight could have gone. But
yeah.
Sugar Died would have been a great close to a record because it really kind of rumbles up and just really satisfies for me. But I guess if the runs are an issue, when you get the runs, go to the bathroom.
No, yeah, that's true.
So
There is a toilet.
were you just going to skip Broken Bones and Pocket Change altogether, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was just another one that Half the City, Grass is Greener, that kind of fell into the category of great background tracks while you're kind of working on stuff. And I know you mentioned that to me early on. You said, hey, listen, put this on like in the background a couple of times, right? And then kind of dive into it. And that's what I did. But I did find that these were, to me, kind of just background songs. And that's not an insult. But I just didn't. Like, I mean, I found my head was bobbing while they were playing in the background. They didn't stick out like maybe the first four tracks did, or Like a Mighty River. What's your kind of thoughts on those three songs?
Well, for Broken Bones, for me, I really liked the way the band is able to build thematically, whatever the fuck, build through the song and really just create a sensation of rising, and then take these turns and get really big and powerful and make it feel like you're moving fast, but without necessarily crashing. Like it really felt like a roller coaster to me, and I really liked that. I like the way they used music itself as a character within the song, to kind of put a stamp on what music means to us emotionally.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great use of his lyrical abilities. Half the City, title track, so no pressure, right?
Yeah, not at all.
It did feel a little kind of cookie cutter to me. It's one of those songs about growing up in a city, and I don't know if it's being because I grew up in the suburbs, and suburb kids just hate everything.
That's true.
Or every place. I don't know. So it was one of the ones that I wanted more because it was the title track. I think it does some great things, but it didn't do anything to impress me. Grass is Greener is actually my least favorite song on the record.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
I dig that it was like darker, and they wanted to go slower and really try to like emphasize the bluesy side of it. It just didn't really connect to me, and like my note is it needed a little more soul.
There you go. Look at that. Look at that. Yeah. I like that. We have next is Let It Be So. And then, of course, Dixie Rothko. I'm going to talk on Dixie Rothko just for 1 second. It's another showcase of the very talented voice. And I can't stress that enough. Thing is, I needed a little more. I needed the voice maybe just for one song not to be the focal point, and replaced it with, I don't know, maybe some variety in the lyrics, or perhaps maybe a memorable chorus. So I'm walking away singing the song as opposed to waiting for the next song. Let It Be So is another track that just really didn't do it for me. I can't even remember even now too much about it. As we're talking about it, even in my notes, I don't have many things to say about it. Mark, your thoughts on those two tracks?
Yeah, absolutely. See, I thought "Let It Be So." The organ, they're clearly like, I don't know if it's a keyboard, and they switch over to the organ, and the horns really, really deliver on this song for me. I felt like it had the soul that Grass is Greener was lacking. And also with Grass is Greener, the hook on it sucked. Like it just didn't hook you. And I thought Let It Be So did just a better job of pulling you in and feeling with it. This is the one I mentioned. I really the bass player throughout this song, just as steady as can be, really holds the whole thing together. As the horns do something a little different, the organ does something a little different as he's singing it. It really gelled it all together. As far as Dixie go, you get that great strong groove buildup after Let It Be So that just really kind of builds, and it really just reminded me of Joe Cocker.
Okay.
Who I loved, and probably falls into that blue-eyed soul category. I just really dug that kind of vibe to it. It really just kind of felt like a little bit of rock and roll, a little bit of soul, just kind of really grinding together. That was one of my other favorites on the album. Was Dixie Rothko. Almost lyrically void of meaning.
There you go.
But just very kind of standard in terms of what you're expecting out of these records. But the performance in it from the band really is what sold it. Especially when I'm not looking for him to deliver on lyrics. I'm looking for him to deliver on vocal performance, and I felt he did. So It's Midnight.
Yeah, I mean, could anything else? I know you mentioned Sugar Died as the close for the album, but really, at the end of the day, when thinking about all the tracks on this album, could there be really another closer besides It's Midnight?
No, because and I don't know. I see. In my opinion, is that it doesn't work anywhere else on the record,
right?
Which is fine. It's definitely got a place. It fits nicely after Dixie Rothko.
Yes.
It's a very somber ending to a record, but like you remember back to the beginning of it, it starts pretty somber, and takes a little bit of that, a little more of the blues up front, as opposed to kind of the pop or the Motown people are expecting out of a soul band. I'm as many of you know, atheist as fuck, and I don't particularly look for religion in songs, but I liked the way he used the music to emphasize a need for the search of one's own faith. We'll leave it at that. I appreciated the way they were able to do that without feeling preachy, and without, or not, obviously the characters are preachy to one another within the song.
Sure.
But it didn't make me as a listener feel like I was being talked down to or told what to do. I really just kind of appreciated it. And I felt like it did do the album some justice, because it was more than just about kind of your standard issue heartbreak. That I think it would be easy to classify this record as just a heartbreak record, without really kind of getting into it. So I appreciated it for the ending. Again, it was a really interesting song. I just don't know where else it could have fit.
Well, yeah, and I actually kind of have now a new appreciation for it too, because if knowing what the light research that I've done on Paul Janeway, and if the upbringing was kind of strict, and I'm sure then religious, and if there was talk he was going to be a preacher once, here he is talking to someone who has the polar opposite view, but it's in a way where, like you said, you didn't get talked down to or didn't feel a certain way, and maybe that's what it's about. Right? Maybe that's what it's about, and maybe that's where the point of that song then comes in. And musically, it's kind of the bookend to then the first track. So I guess just proves what we were saying, where that track can't go anyplace else but the end of the album. Yeah,
that's certainly how I feel about it.
Yeah. Well, what it is with this band, I think they thrive off the live show and the experiences, because I think that's what it is. To some, it could be a religious experience, seeing them that way, the energy, and someone as passionate as this. I think the way to capture the beauty of this band is a live show, and maybe perhaps not on the recording. I like Paul, and I only wish that I was passionate about something the way he was, right? He's a humble dude. He seems thankful for success, doesn't seem to feel that he's more important than he is, who, when me and you both know, we hate that quality, right?
Mhm.
He's not trying to solve the world's problems. Thank God he's not trying to solve the world's problems. And I just like that. He's just a humble dude into it. That's, and I feel like I have the same type of review when I feel kind of middle ground about these albums that you suggest. But that's really the best way that I could say it. It doesn't leave me satisfying and craving music in the way where I feel like my soul, so to speak, is at peace. They check off the boxes of what a good band should be: great singer, humble singer, great musicians, fun sound, great live shows. Just because it doesn't check off one of my boxes doesn't necessarily mean it's bad by any means. So I want to put that out there. I did have enjoyment in listening to the album. They come live, which it's rare that a band like this that we would discover was all of a sudden going to be like, hey, I'm coming to South Florida. But they do come live. I wouldn't turn down their show. So again, I feel I give you, Mark, the same reviews always when you suggest albums to me.
Well, no, I mean, that's all right. Hey, look, we're pushing the boundaries here, right?
We are.
We're feeling each other out in terms
Oh, I
of.
love you threw this out there. I love
Yeah,
that you threw this out.
because what's the worst that happens? You like it, like, I mean, obviously the worst that happens is cloud nothing.
Right.
But like, hey, look, who knows? Maybe this is something that would have snuck on your radar, something you would have been into. That's all right. That's what this process is for.
It is.
Yeah, I hope the folks at home who dare to play along had maybe fared a little better. But hey, it happens.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like I was listening to tracks off the later records, and tomorrow I get a little notification that they got a new album coming out. I will listen to it, absolutely,
Cool.
and especially knowing that Paul is again a genuine kind of real dude. I'm totally happy for his success. If they were jerks or assholes, then I'd be like, Mark, come on, man, this is yeah, you know how that goes. But yeah, same Paul and the Broken Bones, everyone. And I am glad Mark suggested it to me. Just because I'm not the biggest fan of soul music. Don't you guys got to take that for what it's worth. Again, that's just me. That's just my takes, and my taste, and that's the way it is.
Yeah. Hey, just while we're talking about it,
Yes, sir.
what do you want to do next week?
Well, I'm amped for this, man, and this is so we did the undercard, right, which is the Green Day's Kerplunk versus Offspring's Ignition. Now we're getting to the conclusion, right? So here it is, the title fight. The main event. We got two powerhouses, two classics, two staples, not only in our youth, but and just in the 90s for punk, for everything. It's time. We're doing Dookie versus Smash. Mark, I 100% know you're excited for this.
Yeah. I made a playlist that's just these two albums. I've been listening to it on repeat. Because I had the advantage of already knowing what the St. Paul and the Broken Bones album looked like. So I've got like a leg up on you.
Yes.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to really get into these records like we did with the earlier ones. See what still holds up, see what doesn't, and talk about it, and see where we feel at the end of this. I was, those of you who listened last time know that Kerplunk just did it for me. And I got to tell you, man, the more I listen to Smash, fuck, that is a great record.
It is. It is.
So this is not a clear cut. Who we're going to pick because you listened to the last one. I think anything could happen. We got a real MTV Celebrity Deathmatch on our hands.
we really do, and this is one of those records where the singles are so known, but what about these other tracks, right? When we start peeling back the layers of these albums, really, where's the depth go? And And I'm just really excited to get into even some of those lesser tunes that I wouldn't have normally listened to back in the day from these records. But I do know one thing, as we mentioned too in Ignition versus Kerplunk, that these again records, these were staples, and these turned a lot of people on to punk rock. I think they're still great to this day, but now we're going to even take a further look at them and really then give our honest opinion as to which one we like, right, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we don't know what happens to both of these bands.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
This is the best it's going to get for either of them. So the next time you hear us talking about doing one of their records, you know we're going to hate it. This is going to be one of those times you know we're going to love it. So Tune in, have some fun with us.
Yeah.
Frank emphasized 5-star reviews earlier. I'm going to remind you, nothing less. I swear to God, I will come out there.
Yeah, he will. And trust me, folks, he will. He will.
I will. And then rate and review, share with your friends, all that stuff.
Yeah, let us know what you want to. Let us know what you want to hear on here as well. I mean, we're totally open. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up. We mentioned the new releases last week. Actually, me and Mark are gonna meet up for a show later this month, which we will be talking about. And there's an album review that will come with that. So we got a lot of cool stuff planned. But if you guys want something, please let us know. Really excited to share all these things with you guys, and until next time, we'll talk then.
Yeah, and don't forget, I will mock you if you recommend we listen to shit.
Yes.
So
yes,
and ready for that,
and for a lifetime, he'll never let it go.
No, ever.
All right, everyone. Thank you again. This has been the Check Out This Record podcast. Talk to you soon.
Bye bye.